some craziness happened on MSNBC. People used to get upset that Donald Trump used to say about Hillary Clinton, lock her up. Like that was somehow, he crossed the line in political speak somehow by saying that, lock her up. Remember that? That was his catchphrase, lock her up. And that was just the most offensive thing anybody ever heard in politics. And now I'm watching MSNBC, and check this out.
Errol, if you look at counter extremism.
Now, she used to be in the Bush administration. She was their professional liar, and she was their communications person, and she's a big liar, and she covers up for torture, and she doesn't care that people tortured people. So that's who she is, and now she's the perfect person to host the lefty news show on MSNBC. Okay.
Efforts that have gone well. Does that help? I mean, what is your guidance for countering extremism and these radicalized views?
So they're asking this guy, how do you counter extremism? Who is this guy? This guy is a former FBI SWAT guy. This is the guy they're asking how to counter extremism. That guy sounds pretty extreme. He's also a USC Trojan. Good for him.
He's a double Trojan.
He's a double Trojan. Oh my God. What Trojan? The fuck does that mean? And
this is frat.
He's also anti-racist, and his opinions are his own. When you're going to find out, here's his opinion shared by everybody on MSNBC, so they're not his own. Here we go.
That Donnie said do represent a minority of modern self-identifying Republican white men, but a sizable number of them. What does, I mean, does having prominent people quit help, or do they go underground? Tell us what works.
My guidance is that we have to treat it as the terrorist threat that it is. You know, we rallied on 9/11. There was no question about what the country was going to do. We are facing the same threat.
Yeah, what the country is going to do on 9/11 was illegally invade another country that had nothing to do with it, slaughter 1 million fucking people for fossil fuels, and then lie about it and create a torture program to cover it up. That's what we did. Oh, then we also let the cops go ahead and target Muslims in the United States for surveillance. We did a lot of the stuff like that. By the way, we no longer have habeas corpus, and we live in a surveillance state. That's what we did because of 9/11, Mr. SWAT.
Yeah, America's back, baby.
That's what we did. Okay. He wants more of that.
And we need to go one step further. Mr. Deutsch is on point.
We got to go further.
Within torture?
We should label them the domestic terrorist party. If we look at the last...
He's just said we should label the Republican Party the domestic terrorist party. Now, I don't know what you would call incendiary rhetoric or reckless, irresponsible rhetoric. So now half the country are terrorists, and they should be treated. So do you see what this is? You have to hate half the country. Why? Why? Because if you start talking to the other half of the country, you're going to figure out you have more in common with each other than you do with authoritarian fascist fucks like this. That's what's going to, and you're going to find out you have a common enemy and you have common needs. And that common enemy is MSNBC, CNN, the oligarchy. That's your common enemy. The people who run these media corporations. The people who own the politicians. The military-industrial complex, Wall Street, Big Pharma, health insurance, fossil fuel companies, and Silicon Valley. That's who runs this country. And we start talking to each other, we're going to figure that out. And that's why they have to stop that, because their neoliberalism is over. They can't give you health care. They can't give you education without bankrupting you. They can't give you health care without bankrupting you. They won't give you a living wage. People in California have to spend half their income on their housing. It's a failed state. We live in a failed state. Half the country's poor or low income. 80% of workers live paycheck to paycheck. We live in a failed state. So the idea is to make you hate half the country and think they're your enemies instead of the people who are paying his salary. That's what's going on here. And that's why they came at me so hard when I talked to a Boogaloo boy, an anti-racist, pro-LGBTQ, pro-Black Lives Matter right-winger. Can't even talk to those people. Because then the game's up. So here we go. He now wants us to consider half the country as domestic terrorists. Okay.
Decade of data, and as you know, I teach. So
By the way, who sounds like the extremists? Doesn't he sound like an extremist? You want to half the country are terrorists? Who sounds like the extremist?
He teaches where? At a madrasa?
Here we go.
I tell my students all the time, in the words of W. Edwards Deming, a famous data scientist, without data, you're just someone with an opinion. We had a 10-year period between 2010 and 2019 where white supremacists were responsible for 78% of the murders in America.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
So 78% of the murders were committed by right-wing extremists. Most of the murders, it sounds a little off, but it's got to be real because I saw it on Microsoft MSNBC.
Well, Jimmy, without data, you're just someone with an opinion.
You're just someone with an opinion. You got to have data.
That's why we have to keep redacting data to make sure you just have opinion.
And
in 2018,
most murders.
Go ahead.
Wait.
No, he's going to correct it.
Most murders in America. Okay, he's going to correct.
He's going to correct it.
50 extremist murders in America. They were all committed by right-wing extremists. It's time for the president.
So he just said there were 50 extremist murders in America, and they were all committed by right-wingers. So he's worried about 50 murders. This is what he's.
I would say the majority
on.
were. I follow this issue pretty closely, and I would say the majority were, but they were not all committed by right wingers.
What do you call a drone program that Barack Obama presided over and Joe Biden has presided that kills 90% innocent people? Are those massacres? Are those extremists? Those aren't. That's not extreme. So if you blow up 20 women and 15 kids in a hospital, that's not extremist. That's just normal shit that the government of the United States does on a daily basis. Okay.
Do what he was going to do when he announced the plan for the counterterrorism efforts in the country if he got elected. Put this to the Director of National Intelligence, make this a national security threat, vet our police departments, and go back and then start to educate local, state, federal law.
So when he says vet our police departments, does he mean vet them for people who are Republicans? Because he just said they're terrorists, right? Sounds like that's what he means. We have to vet our police departments. By the way, that's just a guy talking. We're never going to vet anything for anybody. Our police departments are filled with fucking maniacs who are attracted to policing. You think those are fucking normal people who want to become cops? Those aren't. Those are fucking all maniacs who want to become cops. They aren't chosen randomly out of society. There's a mindset that is attracted to that. They're bullies and people who were bullied. Okay, let's keep going.
Enforcement on what this threat really is and start educating and make our communities aware of how vulnerable they are and how they are that enabling community that needs to rally against this threat.
They need to rally against this threat. This is it. So here's what Glenn Greenwald said. He says, MSNBC is now explicitly and favorably invoking 9/11 and the war on terror to argue the entire GOP should be designated a domestic terrorist party. Send Mitch McConnell to Gitmo and waterboard Marco Rubio. That's what happens when ex-Bush officials host the liberal network.
I think in the words of the great Nina Jankowicz, if you see something, sing something.
He goes on to say, how do you put a professor on a news show, hear him trumpet how vital data is for understanding the world, and then have him say that from 2010 to 2019, white supremacists were responsible for 78% of the murders in America and not burst out in laughter, or at least correct him? Nobody did. Nobody burst out in laughter.
Where was Nicole Wallace on that one?
And nobody corrected the guy. The guy later corrected himself online. He went online. He goes, today's discussion was regarding extremism. If I misspoke and said murders and not extremist murders, that was the error here and the data I was referring to. So that's what he's talking about.
And the data is from the Anti-Defamation League.
Oh, it was?
That's what it says right there, ADL.org.
Oh, that's reliable.
The ADL is an organization that has denounced me as an extremist because I have advocated for the basic and equal rights of Palestinians. the ADL is an organization that has advanced the replacement theory that Jewish Israelis will be replaced by Palestinians and that this will amount to genocide if Israel becomes an actual democracy and gives Palestinians equal rights. The ADL is an organization that is dedicated to censorship, that has targeted student organizations on campuses advancing Palestinian human rights, that has targeted even during the 1980s anti-apartheid activists focusing on South African apartheid. The ADL inserted spies into Bay Area anti-apartheid groups that were simultaneously working with South African apartheid intelligence. So this is not an organization that I consider anything that has any standing on the issue of extremism or racism. And that's his source.
And that's his source. But you're just another asshole with an opinion if you don't have data from the ADL. So here I want to also. So there you go. So there they bring out a professor, a guy who's a former SWAT guy, who calls
you made an important point, Jimmy, at the beginning. Not just a SWAT guy, FBI.
Yeah.
And what he's doing is he is advancing the bureaucratic priorities of the FBI. More money. We're going to be the enablers. It's just
so
money. And what has the FBI been doing? In a lot of cases, encouraging terror plots and encouraging these crimes. We can talk about that forever, but so many terror plots were manufactured by the FBI.
Well, meanwhile, not paying attention to actual calls and warnings that precede most of these shootings.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, right? So they're always told about who the shooter is. The guy was under psychiatric observation. He showed up to school in a hazmat outfit. The shooter. Anyway, it's just the crazy, and somehow he still was allowed to go commit this extremist violence. But what he's saying is, so he's talking about today's discussion was regarding extremism. If I misspoke the number, he was talking about extremist murders. So apparently 78% of the domestic extremist murders over 10 years were committed by white extremists. Is his point that we need more diverse extremist murders? Is that what he's saying?
We need equity in it.
I don't think he misspoke so much as he disspoke. Good thing no one watches MSNBC, or this could be dangerous.
Is that malinformation, misinformation, or disinformation?
I think it's mal. I like mal.
I thought it was dismissal information was what I've been saying.
Hey, I'm on tour. Come see me in Irvine, California, Las Vegas, Indianapolis, Salt Lake City, Washington. Washington? You mean Washington State?
Yes.
Yes. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all those tickets.